You think you know Vikings, right? Horned helmets, glorious battles, a life of freedom and adventure. Well, buckle up, Buttercup, because the real Viking Age was a relentless nightmare of pain, filth, and starvation that would make you cushy. Modern life looked like a five-star spa retreat. Forget your cozy bed and hot shower. In the Viking world, just waking up was a full-body assault. You're about to discover the brutal truths that Hollywood conveniently leaves out, a kind of daily. Horrors that would send you screaming back to your Netflix queue. From the moment the sun touched the horizon, every second was a fight for survival. Let's start with your rude awakening. No gentle alarm clock here. You'd be jolted awake by the freezing cold, the stench of unwashed bodies, and the constant threat of open fires in a windowless longhouse packed with 20 other people and a few livestock. Imagine the smell. We're talking human and animal waste, stale smoke that clung to every fiber of your clothes and hair, rotting food, and body odor so potent it could peel paint. Viking hygiene? Non-existent by modern standards. Forget brushing. Your teeth. Most Vikings had terrible dental hygiene, leading to constant toothaches, abscesses, and infections that would cripple you with pain. Your gums would bleed, your breath would be foul, and you'd probably spend half your morning trying to dislodge a rotten bit of dried fish from between your teeth with a splinter. Imagine that constant dull throb, occasionally flaring into agonizing. Spikes all day, every day, with no dentist to call, no painkiller in sight. And your clothes? You think you just throw on clean laundry? Think again. Your single set of wool or linen clothes would be stiff with sweat, dirt, and probably some ancient vomit. They were rarely, if ever, truly washed. We're talking about clothes you slept in, worked in, fought in, and probably relieved yourself in on occasion. You might get lucky and air them out by the fire, but they just absorb more smoke and grime. Lice and fleas? Absolute guarantee. They weren't just annoying. They were a constant, crawling torment, carrying diseases like typhus and the plague. You'd be scratching constantly, probably drawing blood, and looking like a walking petri dish. The constant itching would drive you to distraction, making focus on any task almost impossible. You'd feel them scuttling in your hair, burrowing into your skin, a never-ending torment. But wait, it gets worse. Your breakfast would be a thin gruel, often made from stale grain, and whatever meager scraps of dried meat or fish were left from the day before. No coffee, no sugary cereals, just bland, unappetizing sludge that offered just enough calories to keep you from collapsing. And you'd eat it with your unwashed hands, probably sharing a communal bowl with everyone else, passing around whatever. Germs were lurking. Cross-contamination wasn't a concept. If one person had a stomach bug, you all probably would within days. Food was scarce, and wasting even a crumb was unthinkable. Every meal was a reminder of the ever-present threat of starvation. You haven't even made it to midday, and you're already freezing, itchy, starving, and fighting off a dozen potential infections. And then there's the longhouse itself. Forget privacy. You'd be sleeping shoulder to shoulder with family, distant, relatives, and even strangers, all crammed into a single smoky room. The air quality would be horrendous, thick with soot from the open hearth, which had no chimney, just a smoke hole in the roof that rarely cleared the air effectively. Lungs would constantly ache, your eyes would sting, and a persistent cough would become your constant companion. The sheer lack of personal space, the constant noise of others, and the biting cold that seeped in through every crack would ensure that true, restorative sleep was a rare luxury. Every morning, you'd wake up feeling more exhausted than when you went to bed, muscles stiff from the cold and the hard, unyielding ground. Welcome to the Viking morning. It's a miracle anyone made it to noon dot. You think your 9 to 5 is tough? Try surviving a Viking workday. From sunup to sundown, it was an unending cycle of brutal, back-breaking labor that left no room for weakness or complaint. This wasn't about earning a paycheck. It was about preventing starvation and freezing to death. We're talking physical exertion that would break a modern athlete, even those in peak condition. If you were a man, you might be out in the fields, hacking away at rocky soil with primitive tools, a wooden plow, perhaps, or a simple hoe, for hours on end, or chopping down massive trees with an axe, the heavy blows rattling your bones. All of this was done exposed to the elements, whether blistering summer sun that would quickly dehydrate you, or bitter winter winds that would leave your fingers numb and your lips cracked. Imagine the blisters, the splinters, the constant aching muscles you didn't even know you had. Your hands would be permanently calloused, your back perpetually sore, and every movement would be a reminder of the physical toll. There were no safety regulations, no power tools, just raw human strength against a harsh landscape. Accidents were common, and a simple cut or sprain could quickly become infected and kill you. A broken bone, an open wound, or even a deep splinter could easily lead to blood poisoning, gangrene, and a slow, agonizing death. There were no ambulances, no emergency rooms, just a basic understanding of herbs and a hope that your immune system was strong enough to fight off the inevitable infection. If you couldn't work, you were a burden, and in a society so focused on survival, burdens were a luxury few could afford. If you were a woman, your day was no less grueling. You'd be responsible for preparing all the food, which meant endless hours of grinding grain by hand with heavy stones. A monotonous, physically demanding task that would leave your arms aching and your shoulders stiff. Then there was smoking, or salting meat, milking cows, churning butter, and making cheese. All processes that required significant time and effort. Beyond food, there was weaving, spinning wool into thread, mending clothes with crude needles, gathering firewood in all weather conditions, tending livestock, and raising multiple children in incredibly harsh and often unsanitary environments. There was no maternity leave, no sick days. If you couldn't work, you risked your family's survival and your own, and forget about central heating. Keeping the longhouse warm meant constantly feeding the open fire, enduring smoke-filled air that would irritate your lungs and eyes day in and day out. Chronic respiratory issues, from constant coughing to serious lung infections, were just a part of life. The women, who spent most of their time indoors, would bear the brunt of this. The lack of proper ventilation meant the air inside was often far more hazardous than the air outside. But here's the truly terrifying part: the constant, unseen threat. Disease was rampant. Without sanitation, basic medical knowledge, or antibiotics, a simple cold could turn into pneumonia, a minor cut into a deadly infection. Childbirth was a death sentence for countless women and infants, with high rates of both maternal and infant mortality. Dysentery, smallpox, measles, these diseases, for which we now have vaccines or treatments, wiped out entire villages and could decimate populations with terrifying speed. You'd live in constant fear of sickness, knowing that a fever or a cough could mean a slow, agonizing death, not just for you, but for your loved ones. And then there's the violence. Even if you weren't actively participating in a raid, disputes were settled brutally and often without warning. A bad harvest could mean starvation, forcing you to raid your neighbors or face certain death. Every single day was a gamble with fate, a desperate struggle against a world that was utterly indifferent to your suffering. Every blister, every cough, every hungry pang was a stark reminder of how fragile life truly was. You made it to the evening meal. Congratulations. But don't expect a relaxing dinner with lively conversation. This was a grim, utilitarian affair, focused solely on sustenance, and probably filled with underlying tension. Your dinner, if you were lucky, would consist of more gruel, maybe some root vegetables like turnips or parsnips, and if it was a good day, a small portion of meat or fish, often tough, gamey, and full of bones. Forget spices or complex flavors. It was bland, boiled, and eaten quickly to conserve heat and energy. Malnutrition was a constant companion, leading to weakness, stunted growth, and a compromised immune system. You'd be perpetually hungry, even after eating. Your body would ache for more fat, more protein, more everything, a gnawing emptiness that never quite went away. The food was fuel, nothing more, and often not even enough of that. But the real threat at the communal meal wasn't just the food. It was the social hierarchy and the ever-present potential for violence. Disputes over resources, insults, or perceived slights could erupt at any moment. There were no police to call, no courts to appeal to in the modern sense. Justice was often swift and brutal, dispensed by the jarl, the chieftain, or simply the most powerful individuals present. Imagine trying to eat while constantly being aware of who's sitting next to you, who's watching you, and whether you might accidentally offend someone. One wrong look, one ill-chosen word, a perceived slight against someone's honor, and you could find yourself on the wrong end of a sharpened axe or a quick, brutal beating. The atmosphere would be thick with unspoken rivalries and grudges simmering just beneath the surface. You'd learn quickly to keep your head down, speak only when spoken to, and never challenge authority. And what about entertainment? No smartphones, no books, no television. Evening entertainment often involved storytelling, sagas of legendary heroes and gods, or perhaps a skald reciting poetry about battles and glorious deeds. But even these were often filled with themes of bloody revenge, honor killings, and the brutal realities of Viking life, reinforcing the cycle of violence and the harsh code of their world. These weren't bedtime stories. They were cultural blueprints for how to survive and thrive in a world that valued strength and ruthlessness above all else. You might hear tales of glorious deaths in battle, but you'd also know the gruesome reality of what those battles truly entailed. Dismemberment, agonizing wounds, and the stench of blood and fear. You don't learn this in history classes, but alcoholic beverages like mead or ale were often consumed to numb the pain and harshness of daily life. These were strong, home-brewed drinks, often unpurified and potentially containing all sorts of bacteria. But for someone not used to it, this could lead to poor judgment, further increasing your risk of accidental injury or involvement in a deadly quarrel. Drunken brawls were common, and without proper lighting, they could escalate quickly and lethally. Imagine the longhouse, dimly lit by the central fire, the air thick with smoke, and the fumes of fermented grains, the loud, booming voices of men, and the ever-present potential for sudden, explosive violence. As the fire crackles in shadows, dance, you'd be sitting there, exhausted, underfed, and acutely aware that every single person in that longhouse, including you, was capable of extreme brutality to survive. There was no escape, no safe space from the constant tension and the ever-present threat of a world where weakness meant death. Finally, exhausted from a day of endless toil and constant anxiety, you get to sleep. But don't expect 8 hours of peaceful slumber. Your bed would be a simple straw or fur pallet on the dirt floor, shared for warmth with other family members, and crawling with vermin. Lice, fleas, bedbugs, they would be your constant nighttime companions, making restful sleep virtually impossible. The longhouse would still be filled with noise, snoring, coughing from chronic smoke inhalation, the shifting of livestock tethered at one end for warmth, and the constant creaking of the timber in the wind. The air would be thick with smoke and the lingering stench of the day, making every breath a shallow, painful effort. You'd be cold, even huddled with others, and probably struggling to find a comfortable position on the hard ground, your body. Stiff and sore from the day's labor, sleep itself would be fitful and uneasy. You'd be constantly alert for danger, a raid by rival clans, an intruder seeking plunder, a sudden fire ignited by a stray spark from the hearth, or even just the sound of a sick child's whimpers. The fear of waking up to violence, or not waking up at all, would be a constant nagging presence at the back of your mind. Nighttime was when many diseases worsened, when hypothermia could set in during the brutal Nordic winters, and when predators, both animal, like wolves and human, like desperate outlaws, were most active. You'd listen to every sound, every rustle, your heart pounding, convinced that any moment could be your last. You don't learn this in history classes, but many Vikings suffered from chronic pain from injuries, arthritis, from years of hard labor. In damp conditions, and those rotting teeth, making restful sleep a rare luxury. Imagine trying to fall asleep with a throbbing toothache, or with every joint in your body aching from the cold and physical strain. Dreams would be filled with the anxieties of the day, offering little respite. You'd probably wake up multiple times throughout the night, shivering, listening to the wind howl or the distant cries of animals, and just praying for the first hint of dawn, for the safety that daylight, however brutal, seemed to offer. And if you were lucky enough to survive the night, you'd wake up to face another identical day of struggle, pain, and uncertainty. Your chances of making it to old age were incredibly slim. The average lifespan was short, ravaged by disease, violence, and the brutal conditions of daily life. A simple cut from a woodworking tool, a fall during a hunt, a sudden fever, or a bout of dysentery. Any of these could be the end. Life was a precarious balance, a constant dance with death, where a single misstep or stroke of bad luck could mean oblivion. There were no hospitals to recover in, no pensions to retire on, no safety nets whatsoever. Your legacy was what you could achieve through strength, cunning, and sheer endurance. So when you picture the Vikings, remember this. The reality was a relentless grind, where every single moment was a testament to raw endurance against overwhelming odds. You wouldn't just survive 24 hours with them. You'd be broken, battered, and begging for a return to your safe, soft, modern world within the first few. You'd be a sniveling, useless mess, overwhelmed by the filth, the fear, the hunger, and the pervasive cold that permeated every aspect of their existence. And trust me, you haven't heard anything yet.